Pranams to everyone from Shantikunj, Dev Sanskrit Vishwavidyalaya, Himalayas, India. Let us start with the recitation of the Gayatri mantra. Mantra, as the scriptures Shastra define, is Mananata Trayate mantra. The power that protects the mind is called mantra. And who needs the protection? Mind needs the protection, but from whom? From the mind itself, because mind has a power to become its own friend, and it also has the possibility to become its own enemy. We are at the driving seat. We can take our life to whichever direction we would like to take. There is a blessing in the form of human life, but there is also a possibility. A possibility that if everything would go right, our pursuit is right, our objective is sacred, our intentions are just and noble, then in the same human life, person could become like Gurudev and Vivekananda, like any enlightened soul. But there is also a possibility that if everything would go wrong, thoughts are corrupted, emotions are polluted, our intentions are not right, then this can go towards the path of decline, greed, patan, as we say in Hindi and Sanskrit. And the mantra, especially the mantra of Gayatri, provides us the path that can take us to the righteous direction, the path of sadbhav, sanmarga, sadgyan and sadkarma, where our intentions are right, our karma are right, our bhava, our emotions are right, our gyan, our thoughts, our possibility to think and plan, everything is right. And it depends upon the power that comes from the power of Gayatri. And we pray to Ma Gayatri to take us to the righteous path through this piece of Vedic mantra. Join us in the chanting of the Gayatri mantra together. Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahe Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodaya. Pranams and welcome to everyone. We started to discuss the second chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, called Sadhana. First chapter, as we talked about it earlier, was called Samadhi. And the idea of the first chapter was to guide those kind of sadhaks who have already reached to an advanced level, who already have got the vairagya, and the only thing they need is the regular practice. So he gave the idea of Samadhi Yoga, which is called Vyāsa and Vairagya in the first chapter. And the idea was to reach to the ultimate, the final, the most advanced adventure that a human consciousness can take, and that is the Samadhi, Samapatte, Patanjali says. And then he further classified the Samadhis into Sampragyat, Asampragyat, Sabij, Nirbij, Savichar, Nirvichar, Savitark, Nirvitark Samadhi, depending upon the different stages the human consciousness is reaching. But then Vyāsa asked a legitimate question. He said, not everyone has got the mind like those advanced level seekers. Not everyone has got a very balanced state of mind. Not everyone has reached to a consciousness where they have to do nothing but just to do the practice. People are born with prickly state of minds. They have got instability inside. They are worried about the mundane and simple worries of the life. What would you propose to them? So then Patanjali says, for them, the median level seekers, who needs only a action-oriented approach, they only need something to work upon. For them, this chapter starts with the first sadhana. Sadhana means technique. That's why this chapter is called Sadhana Yoga. So for them, these kind of medium level seekers, he gave the idea of Kriya Yoga. Kriya eva yoga, Kriya Yoga. So the first verse that comes in the second chapter is Kriya Yoga's definition. Tapaswadhyaya Shurpadhan Kriya Yoga. He says, what does it do? Like, if I do the Kriya Yoga, Sahi Kriya Yoga. Vyāsa asks the question, what is the purpose of the Kriya Yoga? He says, Samadhi Bhavanartha, Klesha Tanu Karanarthascha. It does two things. It weakens the kleshas and it helps one to attain Sampragya Samadhi. And then comes the natural question, what is the purpose of the kleshas? What are the kleshas? So then Patanjali gives their names. He says avidya, asmita, raga, dvesh, abhinivesha, klesha. These 5 are the pancha klesha. Just like the first chapter started with 5 types of vrittis, this chapter starts with 5 types of kleshas. And he says the kleshas have got a particular purpose. What is the purpose? The purpose is to trouble the chitta. The word klesh would mean inflicting an injury. That's why if somebody is in pain and suffering, in Hindi we call bada klesh ho raha hai. Like, I am in a state of agony and anguish. And this comes from an idea that the idea of the kleshas to exist, the sole purpose for them to exist, is to do 2 things. One is to distract the jivatma, the soul, to an extent where it cannot think about nothing but the manifested world, the sansar. And that's why the first thing it does is gunadhikara dridhayanti. It helps to strengthen the force, impact, effect and influence of the gunas of the prakriti. And second thing it does parasparanuggraha. Each of these kleshas, they support each other. Avidya supports asmita, asmita supports rag, rag supports dvesh. You can have rag, but then opposite of it is dvesh. So they are all supporting each other. And then Patanjali goes even further. He says, avidya kshetram uttaresham prasuptatanu vichinnu dharanam. That avidya is the field. It is like a breeding ground in which all other kleshas that would be talked about later on can grow, they can be processed there, they can be marketed there, they can be sold from that particular field. Kshetra Muttaresham. And these kleshas, they are like seeds, he says. Like in any agricultural field, you would have the crop, and crop is coming from the seed. And these seeds could be in 4 different states. Prasupta tanu udara vichinna. They could be either sleeping, or they could be fully manifested like udar, or they could be weak like tanu, or they could be intermittent like vichinna. And then Vijnana Bhakshu also adds the 5th category called Dagdhabij, destroyed seed. Then he gives the definition of each of them in the subsequent verses. He defines the Vidya as the Anitya, Ashuchi, Dukkha, Anatmasu, Nitya, Shuchita, Sukha, Atmakhyati, Avidya. Seeing permanency in something that is temporary, like my life. My life is temporary. It is started with the birth, it would end with death. But seeing that is a permanent thing. Seeing something that is impure as the pure. Seeing something that is a source of pain as a source of pleasure. That is the whole idea of the Vidya. And then he says, what does it lead to? It leads to the second product of the kleshas, which is asmita. And first original sin, you may call. Drik darshan shakti ekatma eva asmita. The power of the seeing and the seen itself. If they both become the one, if I start to confuse with what I see as my own extension, if I start to think this body that I am wearing like a cloth as my own extension, my own personality, then asmita has taken place. It leads to 2 problems. I believe something is mine, and what is mine should belong to me. Sukhanushayi raga. That creates the problem that I am running after the pleasure that my so-called I would need. Running after that craving is called raga. And others should not have it. If I created a boundary for myself, I also created a boundary for other. This should all come to me, but it also should not go to other. That is dvesh, dukkhanushayi dvesha. And he says that there is a 5th category of kleshas, Swarasvahi vidushah api tatha rudah abhinivesha. Abhinivesh is beyond all these four, because these all four are created different in different life forms. Different times I would take a new name, new life, new janma, new yoni. I create a new asmita depending upon what's been provided to me. Somebody born in the family of king would have a different kind of asmita. Somebody born in a very underprivileged kind of family would have a very different kind of asmita. So we create a new asmita with each and every life that we would have. But abhinivesh, which is clinging to the life and believing that I would continue to live. And that comes with the fear of death. Patanjali says that is there in the smallest of the insect, that is there in the kid, baby that has just opened its first eye in this world. It is there. It is there because he says it's self-fulfilling. It is a proof that this is not the only life we had. It's been there for a long period of time. We are just changing the clothes and we are just changing the bodies. And then we keep wearing a new form, new identity, new shape. Every new life form, every new janma, we are creating a new sets of identities. And that's why abhinivesh is there. How would you deal with the remaining part of the kleshas? Because Kriya Yoga, he already said, is only doing one thing, weakening the klesha. Klesha tanu karanarthascha. What is left? That is very subtle, microscopic, that needs to be dealt with two sadhans, two techniques that he called as pratiprasav and viveka khyate. So he talks about them in the next two verses. Te pratiprasav heya sukshma. They are so sukshma, they are so subtle, they shall be dealt with pratiprasav. Dhyana heya tadvritte. And the viveka khyati deals with their vrittis. Then comes the question that fine, this we understand all this. How these kleshas are giving birth to the karma? So then he talks about the mechanism that underpins the klesh giving birth to karma. Klesh mule karmashaya drisht adrisht janma vedaniya. That at the root of the klesh is the storage of the karma called karmashaya, which is responsible for the drisht and adrisht, seen and unseen janma, life forms that we take and their experiences. Sati mule tad vipako jate ayuh bhoga. And as long as, he says, root continues to exist, it will keep giving birth to jate, birth, ayu, span of life, bhog, experiences of life. What kind of life I would have? This would all be determined accordingly. He says that as long as the SIM is there in the phone, no matter how many times you change the mobile set, it would remain the same because connection is there. And if you are supposed to deal with the problem permanently, cut the connection. That is the solution. So he says, this thing, jati ayu bhoga, is coming from karmashaya. And it is responsible for what? It is responsible for the kind of experiences we get in our life. Te rad paritapa phala punya punya hetutvat. Depending upon the karma that we did before, punya or apunya, good or bad, shubh or ashubh, dark or light, whatever we did before, that would bring rad or paritap, pleasure or pain. That would be the outcome. He says that there is the most beautiful thing then he talks about. He says that common person would think that our good and bad karma are bringing these kind of outcomes. They are bringing the outcomes of punya and apunya. However, parinapadapa sanskara dukkhai gunvritti virodhancha. Now comes the best line. He says, dukkham sarvam eva vivekina. For those who have reached to the ultimate state of the consciousness, they have got the finest understanding. They have got no confusion about how this world is operating. They have understood all the mechanism behind it. They have reached to the final stage of jnana, vivek. They have got the pragya. What they understand? They understand dukkham sarvam iv vivekina. Everything is dukh, whether we get the respect or rejection, whether we get the love or hate, whether we get the anger or admiration. They both are the same. Both are the same whether we are chained with the iron chains or we are chained by the gold chains. Makes no difference, we are chained. Bondage remains the same. Qualitative difference is the same. We all are prisoners. Just somebody is a prisoner in the gold chain and somebody is a prisoner in the iron chain. And we are happy that, oh, you got iron chain and you have got gold chain. That's just idiocy and stupidity. We all are chained. The only solution is the liberation. So he says then first thing that we talk about today, he says first thing that needs to be understood, if you understood that everything is suffering, that why the dukkha is there. He says we can do nothing about the dukkha, the suffering that had already taken place. So here comes the first verse of today. He says, Heyam dukkham anagatam. Heya means eliminate. Dukkha means suffering. Anagat means which is yet to come. Suffering that is yet to arrive. He hasn't knocked at the door so far. He shall and can be avoided. That's the idea of the yogi. This is the most important verse to remember. We can do nothing about what has already taken place. People are mulling over their lives about the things that's already taken place. We can learn from it, but we cannot change it. He said it is also not possible to change what we are suffering now because it is already manifested. The seed has erupted. So we can only weaken it, but we cannot destroy it. But the one that is yet to arrive, that seed can be destroyed. And that is the effort of the yoga. That is the purpose of the yoga. That is the purpose of the tap. To destroy which is yet to reach to a state of fruition. It is yet to manifest. We can change that. We can change the course of action of that possibility which has still not turned into reality. That is the whole idea of the Indian spiritual tradition that we call as the yoga and tap. Heyam dukkham anagatam. Fine, everything is dukkha, we understand. Fine, we understand that everything is suffering, but we are not talking about it because we are pessimistic. We are talking about it because we are realistic. We think that fine, everything is dukkha, then what can we do about the one that has already taken place? Nothing. What can we do about the one that we are suffering right now? Not much. But we can do everything about the one that is yet to arrive. So let's change that. He says, but before we change that, understand what is the reason for that suffering to take place. So he says, drishta drishchayo sanyogah heya hetuh. Drishta, that is the Jivatma, that is the soul that we are truly inside. That is our true consciousness. That is the one that is supposed to be witness. Drish is the manifested world, is the prakriti. It is the manifestation of the prakriti all around. Sanyoga, sanyog means connection. Heya hetu is the reason for this suffering to take place. That is the cause. Cause is because we were supposed to see it as a movie, but somehow we got involved. We started to think this is happening in my life. It's only a picture that is taking place all around me. And somehow we keep getting involved into it. We keep getting involved into it through our sentiments, through our thoughts, through our imaginations, through our planning, through our sankalpa, through our determination. That's why in Gita Bhagavan says, Sarvarambha parityagi sarva sankalpa visarjita. The one who has understood that this world is nothing but a movie taking place. What he does? Sarvarambha parityagi. He doesn't begin anything. How can I begin anything? When everything is happening through the prakriti, guna gudena vartante. Only gunas are talking to gunas. Who am I to get involved? So he says sarvarambha parityagi. Sarva sankalpa visarjita. And he get rid of all kinds of sankalpa. Then whatever flows through me is a will of divine consciousness that comes from beyond the gunas. That is not from the gunas but beyond the gunas. It comes from the other side. That's why if you remember in the chapter 1, when Patanjali is talking about pragya, he says pragya is arriving from the other side. Ratambhara tattva pragya. Then comes the pragya that is coming from the other side. And when it comes, it brings doubtless knowledge. Because anything that is within the perimeter of the prakriti can never be absolute light. It would always have, the sat would have little bit of tam, the full light would have little bit of darkness. And this can only happen if we have transcended it. So he says this connection where we are supposed to sit in the cinema hall like a viewer, and somehow we started to think that we are the participant. That's the mistake that leads to the whole idea of feeling the suffering. Because for a suffering to exist, we need to perceive it. And the moment we start to perceive, we become the part of it. Like in Gita, Bhagavan says, Kshetra Kshetragya Sanyoga. He uses the similar analogy. He says the Kshetra, this world is like a Kshetra, agricultural field. A Kshetragya, the Jivatma, is the farmer. And if farmer starts to think one with the agricultural field, it becomes the reason. They become the same. They are so enmeshed that they forget that I was supposed to be separate. And that's why the ultimate purpose for spiritual practices is to attain the spiritual freedom. The spiritual freedom is the realization of our true consciousness, is of our true self, is what I truly am. And Patanjali begins with this, tada drashtu swarupe avasthanam. Then once it becomes the true drishta, in the third verse of the first chapter, he says, then you become the drishta, and drishta would do what? Swarupe avasthanam. Then it is seated in its true consciousness. Nothing can disturb it, nothing can perturb it, nothing can deviate it from its destined path. So he says, Heyam dukkham anagatam. That suffering that is yet to arrive can be changed. And what is the reason for suffering to exist? Drishta drishyao sanyoga he hetu. Then comes the question, what is drishta and what is drishta? So he gives the definition of drishya first. The manifested world that we call as the sansar, the world, the reality, or whatever we want to call it, the prakriti, whatever we see, feel, this tangible, physical universe is drishya. Everything is drishya. And he defines it. He defines, and it is one of the best definition you would find anywhere. He says, Prakash Kriya Sthiti Sheelam. Sheelam means Swabhava. Sheel means Guna. Sheel means the nature. Prakash means light. Kriya means action. Sthiti means inertia. Not doing one. Rather than using the Sankhya terminology of Sat, Raj and Tam, also Gita uses the same Sat, Raj and Tam. Patanjali has used their qualities. He says the quality of the Sat is Prakash, light, bliss, full of clarity. And the quality of the Raj is activity. That's where the word Raja, like king, comes. Whenever people want to do something, the ambitions, the action, the desires, they come from the Raj. And Tam is inertia, nescence, is darkness. So not only the darkness, not only the inertia of action, but also the inertia of thought, that is the Tam. So darkness to light, there is a spectrum. From matter to consciousness, there is a spectrum. From nothing to everything, there is a spectrum. And this whole spectrum is filled by the three gunas of Prakriti. Prakash, Kriya, Sthiti, Sheelam. He says the Prakriti is run by three gunas. What are the three gunas? Prakash, Kriya and Sthiti. Bhutendriyatmakam. Bhut is the gross element, like the Panch Mahabhut, and also Indriya, the senses. So Bhut includes not only the gross elements but also the subtle elements like Tanmatra. Indriyas, like senses, are not only the Jnanendriya, like not only the senses of cognition, but also Karmendriya, the senses of action. All this Atmakam consists of. So what it says it has the nature of the three gunas. Three gunas, wherever they are, Prakriti is there. That's why if somebody transcends the Prakriti, we call Trigunatit. He has gone beyond the three gunas. And it consists of Bhut, Indriya, gross elements, and how would you perceive the element? Through the Indriya. So their combination, he says, it consists of that. Bhog apvarga artham. That's the best line. Then why does it even exist? For either of the two things. Either liberation or for experience. Either you become part of it or you become out of it. You cannot be both at the same time. Either you become the Paramatma, where you are beyond, where he says that karma daksha sarva bhutadivasa sakshi cheto kevalo nirgunasya. I was never touched and I can never be touched by the Prakriti. Either you go completely beyond, you go beyond the gunas of Prakriti, or you are inside. But you cannot choose to be both. Prakriti can never be on the other side and become Purush, and Purush can never be on this side and become the Prakriti. Once you are in it, then you are bhoging, in the state of bhog. Or you are out of it, then you are in a state of apvarga. He says, Drishyam, this is Drishya, this is the manifested reality, where three gunas are talking among themselves, giving birth to the gross, to the subtle elements. And then this continues to exist for two purposes. Either you experience it or you liberate yourself from it. That is Drishyam. And then in the next verse, that should be considered as the continuation of the last verse. In the next verse also he just defines it. He was also making a bridge between the Sankhya and the Yoga Darshan. So he just defines, for those who go for a much more categorical classification of the Sankhya. So he says for them, Vishesh, Avishesh, Lingamatra, Lingani, Guna Paravani. These guna that Prakriti has, they keep giving birth to other. The ultimate absolutes are the Vishesh, and then Avishesh are there, then Lingamatra and Alinga are there. So those of you who may not know it, they can see the Sankhya Karika. In the Sankhya Karika, the whole idea that how world came into evolution is there. And they use the analogy of churning of the milk. So when milk is churned, then it gives birth to yogurt and other such things. And then you can make toffee, and then you can make the chocolate out of it, or you can make the other products from it. But the immediate evolute that comes from the churning, once you do it, that he talks about that once you do the immediate churning, the first thing that comes out of the milana, out of the conjunction of Purusha and Prakriti is what? Mahat Tattva, that is called Buddhi. It became aware of itself. Moment it became aware of itself, came the asmita, came the idea of ego, then came the sense of self, who am I? And then from that asmita, ahankar, came the manas tattva came. And from man came the indriya senses, came the gross elements, subtle elements. So you reach to a point where it cannot be further divided. That is Vishesh. You cannot further divide it, like earth, fire, like all these. They are the absolutes. You cannot further divide them. Water, it cannot be further divided. So this has reached to the ultimate state that cannot be further divided in terms of the Prakritic classification. And other side is the Purusha and Prakriti. So from that to this end, Patanjali says that everything that comes within, Vishesh, Avishesh, Lingamatra, Lingani, Gunaparvani, this all also is there in the Drishya. that is there in the drishya. And he gives this classification because somebody may say, okay, I can only see this side, manifested reality. I cannot see the tanmatra. I cannot feel like, the Panch Mahabhut. He said, makes no difference, even if they cannot be felt and perceived by you. As long as they are product of the gunas interacting with other gunas, they should be considered in the drishya. They should be the part of the drishya. Anything that came out of the conjunction between purusha and prakriti, drishta and drishya, kshetra and kshetragya, all should be included in this classification. So today we talked about the reason or the way the dukkha that is yet to arrive, suffering that is yet to arrive can be avoided. That is heyam dukkham anagatam. And what is the reason? Drishta, drishya, sanyoga, he, hetu, conjunction between the two. Then he defines drishya, prakash kriya sthiti shilam, bhutendriyatmakam, bhog apvargartham drishyam. And then also he continues in the next verse, he says, vishesha vishesha lingamatra alingane guna paravane. That all is the part of drishya. Then we will talk about the drishta in the next discussion. Thanks for patiently listening. We end by doing the Shanti part. Om Deo Shantirantahariksha Shantehe Prithavehe Shantirapah Shantiraushadhayah Shantehe Vanaspatayah Shantirvishve Devah Shantir Brahma Shantehe Sarvagvam Shantehe Shantireva Shantehe Sama Shantiredhe. Om Shantehe 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 Sarvarishta Sushantira Bhavatu.
हमारे YouTube चैनल शांतिकुंज वीडियो गायत्री परिवार को सब्सक्राइब करें एवं बेल आइकन जरूर दबाएं ताकि गायत्री परिवार की विभिन्न गतिविधियों की जानकारी आपको मिलती रहे।